Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Holy Donuts Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Lombardi, joined today by Carla Della Femina. Carla, how are you today?
I am so great. And Matt, you crushed my last name, man. Thank you. You did so good on that.
I put it on the calendar today to practice it. I got some reps in, and so I felt pretty good about going in. I'm going to be honest. I feel like it was like a 9.5. Didn't quite stick the landing, but yeah. So Carla, you are the co-host of the Gutsy Faith Podcast. You are also a digital marketing consultant working with churches and Christian nonprofits. And so one of the things I was really excited to talk to you about today is this idea of, hey, we all want to grow our donor base, but we don't just want to grow it numerically. We want to grow it in depth, and we want to grow it in relationships, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do ministry and we don't want to be transactional. So with the Gutsy Faith Podcast, it's easy to say, oh, I'm just the co-host of a podcast, but you've really built this entire community around the podcast, right? Which I absolutely love. So I wanted to dive into with you today and talk a little bit more about building that audience, and specifically okay, how do you build an audience around donors? How do you use content wisely to help build that audience? So if you're cool with that, we'll just dive right in. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Hey, and before we jump into, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on the show. I love what you guys are doing with Holy Donuts. I love donuts, and I love the show Holy Donuts. So it's just a win-win. I should have brought donuts today, but that's okay.
So I have to ask, before we really dive into the less serious questions, the most important thing, what's your go-to donut?
That's a great question. I'm a classic glazed girl all the way. Yep. Okay. Just a good glazed donut.
Gotcha. Are there good donuts in Houston? Is Houston donut town? It is kind of, right?
It's a food town. There's everything there. So yeah, 100%. Next time you come through, I'll give you some donuts. And
for the record, I am just not that you asked, but just so that everyone knows, it's important to me that everyone knows. I'm a double chocolate guy, just chocolate on chocolate. That's it. Yeah, that's it. That's
never go wrong with chocolate. I'm glad we got the important stuff knocked out on the front end.
We did. Okay, so to compare great things to small things, let's talk a little bit about building community for donors. So first, just give us the quick rundown of for folks who aren't familiar with the Gutsy Faith Podcast, give us the kind of flyover version of what that is, how it started, and then a little bit of how you're thinking about building community around that.
Absolutely. So I co-host the podcast with my amazing co-host, Gary Meacham. She is, I'm not going to say how old she is, but she is a lot more seasoned than I am.
Absolutely.
And so it's actually been really unique to see how God has brought us together from complete different backgrounds, different generations. We actually started the podcast about a week before the pandemic hit. And so in 2020, we had obviously no idea what we were walking into. I think God's timing in that in retrospect is so amazing, because so many people were so isolated, so hungry for truth, so hungry for encouragement. And so it's been amazing, an amazing journey getting to do this alongside her. And I think something that has been a unique tension to manage, and something that we've learned how to navigate, is really how to build not just community, but cross-generational community.
It's huge.
Because a lot of people from my generation, we're the young guns. We're like, yeah, we don't need the older guys. We know what to do. But truth is, there's so much wisdom and there's so much value to partnering with other people, other generations, people that see things differently, think differently. And so we started as a podcast, and then coming out of the pandemic, really noticed this need for community, right? So many people were being isolated, were stuck in their homes, nowhere to go, so much fear, so much unknown, so much panic. And so coming out of that, really end of 2021 into 2022, we started doing live gatherings. So essentially the podcast, but live. We'd have worship, Gary and I would tag team teach, we'd have prayer, community, and we just began to see people just flooding in, because there was such a hunger for community. And something too unique, I mentioned it earlier, but just this cross-generational community. At our gatherings, we just had one about 2 weeks ago. I'm looking across the room and I literally see a woman on the front row who's 80 years old, and I see another one on the front row who's 16 years old.
Wow.
You have, and they're all here together just to go deeper in their faith, to go deeper in their understanding of the Bible. That's what we do. We try to help people with biblical literacy and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think as far as building that audience and that community, a lot of that did start online, but it didn't stay online. That was a touch point, especially since we were in a global pandemic and a lockdown.
Right.
We weren't able to meet together, but we just found that, community, I think digital has such a key role in bringing people together and uniting people. But I also think there's a huge value in coming outside of the screen, right? And actually gathering people together in person. So we found just a lot of fruit from that.
Yeah. And so talk to me just about the real, probably boring logistics of that. But I feel like that's kind of what we do on the shows. Like we like to get into the boring logistics. That's where the magic happens, right? So you have a podcast, you have these people listening. How do you start identifying like, okay, we think we could do a physical meetup, but how do we know, one, like where do we put it? How do we plan the first one to figure out like who's going to show up? Like, how do we make sure, like, how do we get the word out? Do we talk about it on the podcast? Like, can you just walk us through how you guys actually launched your first kind of physical gathering out of the podcast?
For sure. So I think people first connect to a person, right, before they connect to a brand or connect to anything else. And so for us, my background prior to launching Gutsy Faith, I served on staff at my church in Houston called Hope City for many years. And so through that, built a lot of community relationships. And Gary as well has been super involved. We're both from Houston, or both live in Houston. So we were able to sync some community roots individually. And then coming together, we're able to bring kind of those communities together, which was really fun. So we're both, Houston is huge. There's, 7.2 million people in the greater Houston area. So massive city. And we found that just through conversations, right, and through even analytics on our social media platforms, that a lot of people were coming from all parts of the city, which can be a little bit of a challenge. Yeah. So really the way that we decided where to have our first gathering was two things. One, God blessed us with a church that said, hey, we hear about what you guys are doing. We want to bless you with our venue. And it just so happened to be in the center of the city, which was just truly, I think it was a miracle. I mean, just amazing. So we have people coming from the north, the south, east, west, kind of to the heart of the city. So we wanted it to be easily accessible for people as much as possible, given where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things I'm hearing from you is that kind of power of, no one likes to say in ministry world, but it is like people connect to a person. So it's kind of that power of personal brand, which is what we talk about a lot in kind of corporate world. And it is common that like we work with nonprofits and a lot of the leaders are really reticent to attach themselves personally to the organization and say, well, I don't want it to be about me. I don't want it to be about me. But it sounds like, I mean, my experience has been the same way. Like people do connect to that personality first. And so sometimes if you're trying to build more community around your donors, around your volunteerism, whatever that is, attaching a person to it can be a really, really helpful way to make people feel like, oh, this is a safe space for me to come interact.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I think it brings that personal connection point. I mean, even if we want to talk through like on the marketing side of things, anything that we do on social, emails, any of that, it's all super personable. Like it's from me, it's from Gary. We want to make sure that people feel like they're connecting to a real person because that's what it is, Right.
Yeah. Well, hey there, Holy Donuts listeners. Ever feel like your nonprofit's donor experience is like a jelly-filled donut with no jelly? Well, don't fret. We found the jelly to your donut dilemma. Enter WeGive, the software tool that's like the cream filling to your eclair, or should I say the glaze to your donut. With WeGive, you're not just taking a donation, you're rolling out a red carpet for every person who gives to your organization. And with WeGive, you get an incredible donor portal, events, pledges, surveys, segmentation, on and on we could go on the features. And those checkouts though, smoother than my attempt to make homemade donuts, which let's just say didn't quite rise to the occasion. See what I did there? With WeGive's innovative engagement tools, your donors won't just feel the love, they'll be coming back for second. Because nothing says thanks for your dough better than a world-class experience. So if you want to sprinkle some extra special magic on your donor relationships, check out WeGive.com. So any strategies that have worked really, really well for you all at Gutsy Faith in terms of building a community both online but also in person?
Yeah. I love our creative team. I've got like a group of girls that are just so excited to create content for the kingdom. You know, I'm coming at it from a faith approach.
Right.
We go from the mindset that everything that we do is to reach people, and it's to add value to people. I think when it comes to marketing strategies, you know, any marketing expert will tell you add value, add value, add value, however that may be. So that comes through informational content, educational content, even entertainment content as well. We just did over the holidays, you know, the trend, like, we're marketing experts. We are on our laptops. You know, we just did that video from a Gutsy Girl's perspective, and, you know, it blew up. People resonated with it. So I think staying on top of, staying on top of trends, but also having a pulse on some of those felt needs.
Yeah.
Like, what do people need right now? What do our people need? What do they need that maybe they don't even know that they need? And how can we address some of those felt needs and bring value to them, whether or not they even maybe realize that that's what we're doing?
Yeah, that's huge. Well, in the ability to, I mean, what you guys are doing with the ability to actually know your audience at a level, because it takes a real awareness of who your audience is to be able to create content that's contextualized enough that they get it, right? Because I've seen nonprofits try to do the funny game, right? Try to like do the meme game, and it's like, ooh, you really missed the mark. No one thought that was funny.
I'm so glad you hit on that. You know, I consult with churches as well.
Yeah.
Some of them are larger churches, some of them are smaller churches. And I've seen some, you know, smaller churches in like super country towns, and they're looking at what a church in LA is doing or in New York. And it's like, no. Like,
it's not going to work there.
Right. Like, your people are country. They're not like these. We gotta make sure that the content that we're releasing is real.
Yeah.
It's authentic to who you are. You know, I've done a lot of studies on Gen Z. I love the young generation, love getting to pour into them. And the number one thing that they are after in terms of the content that they're consuming is authenticity. They can sniff fake, they can sniff plastered, copy and paste from a mile away. They just want something that's real. And I think that's one of the reasons too why TikTok is doing so well as a platform. Look at most of the content on there. It's not highly produced. It's real, it's authentic, it's kind of everyday, it's more casual. So I think, when it comes to content creation and connecting with your audience, just being true to who you are. You're the best you that you can be. So stop trying to be somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's great, because it's so easy to say, oh, well, they're, especially for smaller nonprofits or, you know, anyone who's looking at, well, World Vision does it this way or Charity Water does it this way, so we should do that. I had a client reach out to me via email the other day. I was like, how can we partner with celebrities like Charity Water does? And I was like, I don't know. Do you want to spend $2 million to throw your annual Met Gala? Because that's what they do, and that's how they get celebrities in New York City. So unless you're going to do that, probably not a repeatable strategy for you, right? And so, which is great. Like, I don't know how much they actually spend on that, but I'm guessing the Met is not cheap to rent out for their annual gala. So don't quote me on that, Charity Water. But there's definitely something to be said for like know who you are as an organization and know who your donors are and like what they value, and then communicate with them in a channel that resonates with that. Really interested to hear your take on broader trends in ministry nonprofits. I know you do consulting on 4 different ministries. What are some trends, or a trend maybe, that's got you really excited for like the future of ministry and nonprofit? And what's one that maybe has you a little bit nervous?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we'll start on a high note. Okay. What I'm most excited about, I think I mentioned it earlier, when it comes to content production. You know, for a long time, we've been so conditioned to, we have to have the newest, greatest, latest camera. It's got to be super high production value. And I value that. I do love an excellent presentation. But I think, especially like I said before, with the up and coming generation, I think they care less about that and more about just the actual content, you know, and the authenticity, the realness of it. And so I think we live in a day and age now where if you have this,
Yep.
You can create content.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, how big you are, how much revenue you have as a nonprofit, as an organization, you can create content if you have this. So I think the accessibility for organizations to create content that adds value to people, that's engaging, is increasing across the board. If that makes sense. I just think the ability or the access that organizations have now, no matter how big or how small they have, to create content and to create valuable content is just increasing. So that means that they can reach more people, add value to more people, impact more people. So I think I'm excited about that. And two, it'll be fun to see over this year. I've read a lot of articles on, social media marketing predictions in 2024. And a lot of the stuff that I've read have said, hey, I think we're shifting into a less produced content era and more into just the organic, authentic feel when it comes to content. So I think I'm excited about that because it creates a lot of opportunity and possibility for people and for nonprofits. And then on the other side, maybe what's most concerning, I think AI is going to be a really unique space to monitor in the coming months and coming years. I'm all about working smarter, not harder. I think there's so much value, right, that AI can bring in that sense. I've used ChatGPT. It's so unique. I also think as it continues to progress, especially, when it comes to artificial intelligence in video content, people saying stuff, you don't know if they're actually the ones saying it or if it's. So I think there's a possibility for a lot of trust maybe to be lacking, maybe some cynicism to start creeping in as that becomes more popular. So I don't know. It's kind of a waiting game on that, but that's just something I have my eyes on, and I'm curious to see how it's going to affect, things on the marketing and the donor development side.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask for a bonus question here. Follow up to these. We hear from clients sometimes who will say, we're big fans of podcasts, in case you can't tell around here. And we're also big fans of video podcasts because we think YouTube is a vastly underrated social network.
Totally.
And video podcasts are a great way to leverage that. But we often hear from clients that podcasts are they're passe. Like everyone has a podcast. Everyone has a podcast. Why would we possibly do a podcast? Can you speak a little bit, because you are a podcaster, of the value of podcasting and what you love about it and how you think it's a unique platform for ministries to kind of get their message out there?
Yeah, that's great. I think you shouldn't create a podcast just to create a podcast.
Great insight.
Right? So I think you have to make sure that if you are, just because you can doesn't mean you should do something. Now, but with that being said, I think there absolutely is so much value. We live in a world with resources at our fingertips. And this is where people are going for their information. This is where people are going to receive education, to receive entertainment, all of it. And so, when it comes to podcasting, I think there's so much opportunity for you as an organization, as a nonprofit, to get your message out and to do that in a creative way.
Right. That's key.
I think one of my favorite things has been watching, even on TikTok, doctors, lawyers, people in fields that you would never associate having a large following on social media. They found a creative way to connect with people, to add value to people, and ultimately to build their audience through that. So, I think there's so much room, so much opportunity to add value to people in the podcasting space as well.
Love it. So, Carla, what are some resources you love to recommend to others who are in the marketing and the comm space and donor development, who really their charge is, how do we let more people know about our mission, right? What are there books, are there blogs, are there magazines? What do you like to recommend to folks?
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe the first resource that comes to my brain is Donald Miller's Story Brand
That's great.
That's just a go-to. He's got so many great resources on that, building a story brand. And gosh, there's so many. Jenna Kutcher is somebody that I really like with the Gold Digger podcast. She's got a lot of great resources on specifically email marketing. She's got some great stuff there. Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He, cusses like a sailor, but as far as content goes, what he has to say is so spot on. I think he's one of the most brilliant marketers, and I try to learn from him as much as I can.
That's awesome. Okay, so if folks want to connect with you,
and you guys, obviously, come on. Number one, duh.
There's no obligation to mention the Holy Donuts podcast. You should not ever in the same breath say story brand Gary Vaynerchuk, Holy Donuts podcast. If people do want to connect with you, Carla, if they want to hit you up for whether that's some consulting work, whether that's just to connect because they're like, you're cool, or like they want to hear more about the Gutsy Faith podcast, what's the best way to reach out to you or to connect with the work you're doing?
Absolutely. I'm a big social media girl, so you can follow me on social, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. It's just at Carla Della Femina, DellaFemina, last name, which you crushed. And my website as well, just carladellafemina.com. I have some resources on there. And Gutsy Faith, obviously, we're on Spotify, Apple, gutsyfaith.com, all of that.
All the places you get your podcast.
All the places. Yeah.
Well, Carla Della Femina, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Holy Donuts podcast today. It's been an absolute privilege. And we'd love to have you back sometime. This has been a lot of fun.
I would be honored, Matt. Thank you so much. Great conversation today.